and welcome to another episode of Glen Coco's Caller of the Week. I'm excited because today I'm joined by Josh Wolfe. Josh was one of our early adopter callers, and it's really nice to be on this call with you. How are you doing today, Josh?
Doing great. Thank you for having me. I was excited to, discuss live sales, Glencoco. Yeah, I was looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
awesome. So I think, Josh, like to kick things off, I think just to get some context, what would be super helpful is if you could tell me about just sort of your general sales background and your experience before Glen Coco. Sort of what were you up to in your sales journey before Glen Coco? And then if you could talk to us about how you sort of found out about Glen Coco from that point on, that'd be super useful.
Yeah, so I can give you a little background on myself. I have a background in sales and recruiting since I graduated college. I started off actually doing door-to-door sales. I did for a company called Energy One. So I went door-to-door selling windows. That really launched my sales career. I'm like, oh, I can do this. Sales is pretty fun. I like that competitive drive. That the ability to determine your own financial destiny were some things that I really liked about sales. And then I moved into more of tech sales. I worked for a company called RealPage, and I, did a little bit of real estate sales as well. I worked as an acquisitions manager as well. I had a lot of success in sales. I was top performer at a lot of the companies that I was working at, and I really enjoyed sales. I love talking to people, of building relationships. That's something that I really enjoyed, and one of the companies I worked at right before I found Glencoco was Aragon Investments. They were doing a change in the commission structure, and I knew that I wanted to make more money. And that's when I came across Glencoco. I liked the ability to, determine your own hours and also determine how much money you want to make based on the campaign. I signed up for Glencoco, and I was like, I'm going to put in the time and effort, it takes to be successful. And I was able to start booking meetings on my first week at Glencoco. I was mostly calling on like the campaigns on, and yeah, I started booking meetings and started bringing in the money.
That's awesome, man. And just so to double click on that, right? You how exactly did you find out about Glen Coco? So when you learned that your commission structure is changing, you're like, hey, I want to find more. Like, what kind of research did you do? What were sort of the factors that led to you signing up on Glen Coco?
Yeah, I was actually so I applied for a job that was they were asking for like cold callers, and then
Hmm.
they referred me to Glencoco. I don't know if they received like some sort of commission perhaps, but I was a referral, so they referred me to Glencoco. It was a connection I had. They told me to sign up, and you can make commissions, you can determine your own schedule. It was things that I was looking for. And I was like, yeah, this sounds like right up my alley.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I think a lot of what we look for at Glen Coco, right, is I think the perfect profile is someone like yourself that's had sales experience, has a passion for sales, has like kind of cut their teeth doing B2B sales of some sort, like tech sales is great, right? You know your way around like a dialer, you've done cold calling, things like that, right? Those kinds of like prior experiences prime you for Glen Coco really well because like you have sort of the raw knowledge on how to sell. You're clearly a great salesperson, and you were just able to sort of pivot and retool on to Glen Coco. So, can you tell me a little bit about sort of what was your experience from when you signed up to made your first call on a campaign? What was that onboarding experience like for you? Like, can you talk us through sort of what were some of the things that jumped out to you about that experience, positives, things that you wish you had as you were onboarding? That would be really helpful for context.
Yeah, absolutely. My first time on Glencoco, I'd never really been on a platform like this, and it was described as like the DoorDash for sales people. I have worked DoorDash actually before as well, so I'm like, okay, so I kind of knew what that meant. Is you have a lot of determination on how much success you're going to have on the platform. It's based on how much work you're actually putting in, how many hours you're putting in. I remember the training that I went through, getting approved for my first campaign, home fix. I remember doing that, going over the script. It was, I remember it being well organized, looking through, the training materials, learning the script, and then getting right onto the phones. Um,
Right.
I don't, yeah, it was, it was very much, um, it- mostly doing it, self-paced, self-studied, which,
Hmm.
I do like because I'm a person that has self-motivation. I'm able to complete things. I'm able to set goals for myself. So,
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to complete the training and get started. And once I started on home fix, the other trainings just came easier. Like I remember I completed training for on of other trainings I completed, and getting
Yeah.
approved to call. It wasn't difficult at all. I really enjoyed it.
And then can you, like, before Glen Coco, had you done cold calling before, or like in some other capacity, or was this your first time doing like straight up outbound cold calling? Had you done that before? And if you'd done it before, sort of how did the experience of cold calling on Glen Coco compare to what you'd done before?
Yeah, so I had experience cold calling, but generally I wasn't using a dialer like Glencoco. So it was more manual dials that I had to do. Because I've done real estate sales, so I'm calling on homeowners. I've done tech sales, like for software, real estate management company was called RealPage, but it was more of manual dials. Glencoco, they have a cool feature where they have an auto dialer with the contacts already populated, which allows you to reach more people, which is something that I did really like. It allowed me to get in front of more people, and we all know sales is a numbers game. So I was able to, get more connects. It's something that I hadn't really been exposed to very much as far as being on an auto dialer with Glencoco's platform. So that's something that varied with Glencoco. Also, that I haven't really called on multiple campaigns before at once. So I was able to
Right.
set meetings on like 2 or 3 different campaigns, which is pretty cool because I usually was just, calling on one company at a time. So transitioning back and forth, that is can be a challenge for some people, but I had a lot of experience with multitasking. It was perfectly fine, and I kind of
Yeah.
learned to kind of distribute my time among the campaigns that I really identified with and the ones that really resonated with me. It's kind of how I learned to balance all that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think the notion of like being able to multitask, and I think this is one of the things that we at Glen Coco were pretty bullish on, right? We realized that, like, if someone's a good enough salesperson and they have the aptitude to sort of pick up, like, you know you're like, okay, I know how to pitch this product in this vertical. You could, with minimal retooling, sort of, also you have the bandwidth to like pitch other products in a similar vertical, like an adjacent vertical, right? And I think that's one of the things that that you mentioned, that, but like that's one of the things we try to encourage and cultivate amongst our callers, where you're not tied to just one campaign or one company, which is your situation in the real world, right? Like, if you
Yeah.
run out of leads in your company, then you're just sitting on your hands until like someone gives you more leads or something of that nature. Versus with Glencoco, since you get to sort of pivot between campaigns, you can always keep yourself busy and like always find where the leads are to dial into and kind of make dials that way.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
and in terms of like the specifics of calling on Glen Coco, like, for someone watching this that's about to get on, make their first couple dials on Glen Coco, what would be some advice that you'd give to them in terms of how to structure your workflow on Glen Coco? Because I know that you had a fair amount of success with the qualified meetings on more than one campaign. So I think that'd be really interesting to know. So what were your major like the major things that you cared about, or made sure that you had buttoned down when you were calling on Glen Coco?
Yeah, I mean, there's several things I would recommend to someone who wants to be successful, particularly with cold calling, particularly with Glencoco. One of the things is to just understand the script, to understand what you're talking about. And I usually went with the permission-based approach when speaking with
Mhm.
prospects. So just, being respectful, asking for their time, being professional, being clear and concise. And one of the biggest things I'd recommend is just asking great discovery and qualifying questions. Find what their pain points are. That's something that I was very good at. I would ask, are you struggling with this? Or is this something that you guys are working on? Whatever that question might be, find the pain points. Do the discovery. That's going to make sure that they actually have a reason to show up to the meeting. Once they understand the value that the company is bringing, and they have the pain, that's something that you definitely want. And then as far as making sure they're qualified, make sure to follow up with them, send that email to confirm, follow up with them, make sure, they got everything. That's something that I always did. Um, Made sure they had the email, they had the calendar invite. So I just always wanted to confirm everything.
I I mean, I'm so glad you said this. So like, so much of the game is in the follow up, right? Like I think people get sort of they over index on that first call. And the first call is really important, right? And like a lot of the SDR discourse and a lot of the SDR sort of, the materials that you find online for like coaching how to become a better SDR, a lot of that focuses on like the content of that first call. And that's important stuff, right? Like how to have an opener, how to pitch it correctly, how to ask for a meeting and things like that. But really like where SDRs really win is the persistence game, right? So you're not like the
Yes.
odds of you getting like a one call set is actually low, but it's the ability for you to follow up, do that second touch, third touch, right? Like and having that consistent cadence, right? That's really where people win out. And not only that leading up to the meeting set, but then between when you set the meeting and the meeting is due to run, you also want to make sure that you're sort of cultivating that because a cold call, like even if someone agrees to a meeting off a cold call, for them, that meeting is like the lowest in their order of priorities, right? They've got like their day job.
Exactly.
And then this is like, hey, this guy called me out of the blue yesterday and asked if I have time next week. So I was interested, but it's also like not the most important thing. So to make sure it stays on their radar and it doesn't get punted or deprioritized, you got to like
Yes.
massage it a little more as well.
Exactly. It
Um,
takes time to nurture it, and that's something that I always did. And like if I called someone and they're like, "Hey, call me back tomorrow. I'm at my son's birthday party." I will put that
right,
on my calendar to make sure to call them back on like Tuesday or whenever they said, and I'll remember and I'll be like, "Hey, how was your son's birthday party? I was giving you a call back." Sometimes you
right.
gotta like remember your callbacks, keep them organized, and call them when you say you're gonna call them, and then that will lead to meetings. Yeah, because a lot of the times I didn't do a one call meeting. It took several calls to book that meeting. So yeah, you're exactly right about that.
I mean, I think that's a large part of it, right? Like I think with Glen Coco, what we try to do is we try to maximize the amount of time you're able to spend having conversations with like real people. Like for the reps, we're like, hey, our dialer, our tech will let you sort of stay on top of your workload across multiple campaigns. And when you're calling, you can make sure that you're maximizing your time talking to like prospects, right? We give you that. But then after that, like it's very much like the ability of the individual salesperson, right? That determines your success or failure on the platform. And then speaking of which, just to switch gears slightly, like for you, I know that you had a spree where you were consistently earning on Glen Coco. What was the ROI like for you? So how much time would you say that you spent on the platform? And like just estimate ballpark, what did you make for it? And would you say that was worth your time?
Oh, absolutely. I'd say the ROI is really high, especially compared to a lot of things you can do with such flexibility with your own time and schedule. I'd say, working 15 to 25 hours a week, you can make $1,500 to $2,000 a week. Once you add in, I was winning the weekly competition. I was named Glencoco Closer of the Month. I'm getting bonuses, and you guys do offer great bonuses for people who are being consistent booking qualified meetings. And then I was obviously getting the money from the qualified meetings too. You can get a great return on your investment for your time. As far as, like only working 15, 25 hours a week, you can make, well over 1,000 to almost $2,000 a week.
I mean, and that's really what we shoot for, right? Like the ability to like for you to work part time, like 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week. That's like 3 to 4 hours of calling in during a weekday. Assume you're calling Monday to Friday, right?
Mhm.
And the ability, if you're able to sustainably make like $4,000 to $5,000 calling part-time. And, we have some reps that have been spending more time on the platform since the last time you called for us. And,
Yeah.
people kind of starting to touch that 7K mark and things like that, which is quite enticing. But I think realistically, you could easily, I think any rep that's like an adept salesperson could hop on Glencoco and with expending consistent time, sort of like attain what you're talking about, like that 2K a week sort of price point. Or and to me, right, how would you contrast that against sort of other gig work that you've tried, right? Like I think that to me is like the biggest question. I think a lot of people watching
Yeah.
this would have that question, right? It's like, hey, I'm like, someone watching this is ostensibly like, hey, I'm interested in doing some kind of gig work, and they're looking at Glencoco as an option, and they're probably weighing this against other things, like, it could be DoorDash, it could be driving for Uber, it could be, it could be any of these things. So,
Yeah.
like, in terms of like the gig work calculus, like how would you say this stacks up against like other gig work stuff that you've done?
It's the best gig work opportunity I've ever done. Glencoco is. It's absolutely the best for a couple of reasons. I have done DoorDash, I've done Uber, I've done all those things, and the amount you're going to make per hour doesn't compare with what you can do with Glencoco in limited time. Like you can go work DoorDash, Uber, work 40 hours, and you're still only making $600. But then when you take off gas, the mileage on your car, you're taking off all these things. It's the return is not really there per hour. You're not making nearly as much as you can make on Glencoco. So I'd say the return that you can get on your time is definitely Glencoco. I would say is a way better opportunity. Of course, you have to be persistent. You're going to have to be dedicated to making the dials. And once you look at your data, you say like, okay, I have to make this many dials to get a meeting. I have to do this many meetings to get a qualified meeting. And then once you're doing all those things, the return is going to be so much better.
Yeah, I think for me that's the main thing, right? Like at Glencoco, like we don't try to like bait and switch callers, or like, tell you you're gonna make a crazy amount of money and then you show up and the reality is different. Like we're
Yeah.
confident that this is like a platform where you can consistently make decent returns, but it's predicated on your ability as a salesperson, right? Like you need to be an adept salesperson, and
Yes.
then also need to spend, like, you need to invest your time, right, in the platform. And I think those two things,
Yes.
if you're willing to do those two things, there's a pretty consistent path to income, right?
Yes.
In terms of sort of Glen Coco as like a milestone in your career, or like a stepping stone in sort of your sales career. Do you think that like the time you spent on Glen Coco, has that come in handy for you? Because I know right now you're working somewhere else, like, you're working a full-time sales job. Uh, do you think like the experience or like the time you spent on Glen Coco was helpful in kind of cultivating your general sales profile or narrative in any way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My experience at Glencoco was extremely beneficial to my career. Yeah, it helped me get where I am today, the experience, just because the ability to call on multiple campaigns is something that is very valuable as far as experience. And also, I had a lot of success with Glen Coco as well, which looks great, on my sales resume. I can say I've won the weekly competition, I've been closer of the month.
Yep.
And it looks great on a sales resume when you can say, and it's all data that is quantified where you can say, look, I booked this many qualified meetings in this many hours. Like
Yeah.
it's great data. It's great to go on a sales resume. So yeah, there's people looking to get started and sales, improve themselves or take the next step in their career. It's a great way to get started and launch a sales career.
Cool. And then in terms of like, I guess the last question I have for you, right, is like, for someone who's watching this and they're like, hey, should I do this, right? Like, what would be some advice that you give them? Just and this is in terms of like, could be what you wish you had known or someone had told you before you signed up on Glencoco, right? Like, do you, if you had to give guidance to somebody that's like trying to decide, like, hey, should I or shouldn't I spend my time here? What would that advice be?
Yeah, I would say, of course, take into consideration, everything. So I would say just go ahead and sign up and give it a try. Go ahead, listen to some of the successful calls, listen to how people are booking meetings. Go ahead and look at, what finances you can get from Glen Coco. So look at, what their rewards are. Look at, the amount of money that you can make. And I'd say just go ahead and give it a try. Because especially if you've already done sales before, like Glen Coco is like a no-brainer to try out. Just because of the amount of success and return on investment you can get for your time. And there's multiple campaigns you can try, which is another reason I'd really push for them to give Glen Coco a try, because you're going to find there's campaign on there that you're going to resonate with, that you may even have experience with. So it's good just to go ahead and sign up and get started, and then like explore the platform, explore the campaigns, and try it out.
Yeah. And I think that's like another thing, right? Like it's ultimately like if you've done sales before, like we're adding new campaigns to Glencoco all the time. Like we're adding new campaigns every single week, right? So like, and we have campaigns that span multiple industries from cybersecurity, legal tech, HR tech, right? Like insurance tech, compliance tech, like just so many different industries. So if you've done sales across any of these, like, it could be e-commerce sales or just general B2B SaaS sales, right? It's super valuable as a skill. You can show up and sort of leverage your industry know-how, not just like your sales know-how, but even your industry specific know-how to like get qualified meetings. And I think that's something that's we're seeing more and more of, where it's like people that have cut their teeth sort of selling into that specific industry, right? Could be legal tech, right? They've sold legal tech before, are showing up and crushing it on Glen Coco's legal tech campaigns, which we see as like a really exciting development. Josh, on that note, you're our caller of the week. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. We loved having you on the platform. When you were calling for us, you were crushing it. We'd love to have you back anytime. And other than that, thank you so much for your time. All the best in your future career and journey. And you go Glen Coco. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.